Welcome, everybody. My name is Tim Kaltenbach, and you have just joined the monthly seminar of the Tennessee Native Plant Society tonight, June 17th, 2025. And we are extremely fortunate tonight to have as our presenter Holly Taylor. So I'm going to introduce her, and she I happens to have, I know, some very exciting things for us to look at tonight. So Holly graduated with a degree in a BS in conservation biology. She's a biologist from Tennessee Technological University in 2009. And for since 2006, she has worked for the Tennessee State Parks as an interpretive ranger, including 5 years assisting the retired state naturalist Randy Hedgepath. And right now, Holly is the Area 4 interpreter ranger, and her specialty is natural resources. And she was explaining to me that um, Area 4 of the state parks divisions is quite exciting. It has about 10 state parks and some amazing things. And um, she's in a really great spot, and many of you, I guess, have met her before. Holly has many years of leading hikes, tours, classes, and a lot of interpretive programs where she features the state's very rich natural heritage. And so I am pleased to turn the turn the podium over to Holly. Welcome. We're so happy to have you here tonight.
Thank you so much. It's my pleasure to be here. I know this is an easy audience tonight. This is a great chance for me to really geek out about plants. I don't get too many opportunities to do that much anymore, so we're going to have a good time. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and it worked earlier, so let's see if it works again. Okay, can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. All right, good deal. Well, like I said, it's a pleasure being here this evening. It's my joy to share out some of the amazing projects that are going on statewide. I know I'm partial to Tennessee state parks, but I think we have an incredible state park system. More parks are coming into the fold. By the day, it seems like we're up to 61 state parks, and so I really wanted to feature a lot of the victories that are going on. I know in our current climate, it can be a little depressing sometimes, but I wanted to kind of focus on some of the victories. And it's important to celebrate those victories whenever we can, and talk about some of the amazing projects and the people and all the partners that take part in that as well. And I wanted to kick it off with our state parks mission statement, and it is to preserve, protect, and share Tennessee's natural and cultural resources while providing safe and quality outdoor experiences. And this is at the heart of what we all do in Tennessee state parks, because our end goal isn't just for people to enjoy themselves when they come to a state park, to our public lands. Our end goal is to set them on a path to stewardship, because we want ultimately people that are going to be active participants in conservation alongside us. But it does present a bit of a conundrum because we have a lot of real sensitive ecosystems. We have these sensitive environment sensitive species. So how do we share those while preserving and protecting those? And there really isn't a cut and dry answer. There's no easy answer to this, because anytime we visit a space like this, whether we intend to or not, we do impact it in some way. We trample, sometimes we bring in invasive seeds from invasive species or foreign pathogens. Sometimes we unknowingly reveal exact locations of species that are then, dug up and sold on the black markets. There's a lot of potential negative impacts. So you would think that, you would need, oh, can everybody still see me?
Yes,
Okay, sorry. Something popped up. I just wanted to make sure.
that's someone was coming into the meeting.
Okay, it said to share screen again, so I was making sure I was
Oh,
still.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. Okay, we're good. Um, and so we would think the solution would be to just completely close these areas off to the public. And occasionally that is what we have to do just to really preserve and protect them. But, it's easy for us. We all, I know a lot of people on this call this evening are already active participants. We all have relationships. Probably people on the call have helped preserve these lands, help promote them, write about them. But, when it comes time to hand off the torch, the next generation, they're going to have to also form a connection and a sense of ownership of these lands. So that's where the importance of the sharing comes in. And again, there's something that we wrestle with on a daily basis and sharing. And this goes for cultural resources as well. So we're always kind of riding that tightrope. So you all have probably seen this map before. This is kind of a simplified version of the physiographic map of Tennessee, and it highlights all the different, or at least most of the different physiographic provinces across the state. And I shared it just to illustrate how incredibly diverse our state is. And it really all comes back to the geology, right? The geology is the literal foundation on which every ecosystem is formed. The geology is going to determine the soils, the hydrology, the elevation, the aspect, the slope, all of these things that create these little microclimates. And the result of that is a lot of speciation, a lot of endemic species, and really unique plant communities. And so that's really what we lend our uh, diversity to and makes us one of the most diverse states. And of course, our flora reflect that. This is probably an outdated figure, but in the 2015 edition of the Guide to Vascular Plants of Tennessee, they reported 2,421 documented native species. I think that number has actually gone up. And we've had a rich history of documenting flora since at least the late 18th century, with European naturalists coming over and documenting species. And according to the Division of Natural Areas in 2021, there are 543 rare species tracked statewide and about 153 species stayed endangered. And again, those figures may have changed in the last few years. But to sum up, we have an incredible diversity present and a lot of amazing plants to talk about. And so I wanted to begin in West Tennessee. I'm actually going to go kind of from West to East Tennessee to feature these different parks and different species. And I feel like sometimes West Tennessee draws the short stick because when we think of beautiful, amazing places in Tennessee, West Tennessee isn't usually what comes to mind. We are often thinking about the mountains or places like Savage Gulf, and those are beautiful too. But we also have to recognize that West Tennessee is also has treasures in it, and there are species there that are found nowhere else in the world. Of course, West Tennessee is greatly altered just because it would have been a lot of swamps around the rivers. Those rivers have been mostly channelized, swamps have been drained. So there's not very much left of what once was in West Tennessee, which makes those pockets that are there incredibly precious. And so the first species I want to talk about is the copper iris or Iris fulva. This is a species that is considered threatened and one of 7 native irises that are found in Tennessee. And I've always found it sort of ironic that our state flower, the iris, the state flower, is the cultivated one. We have so many native ones to choose from, but that is now our state cultivated flower, and we have 2 other state flowers. Anyway, I digress. But this is a wetland species. It'll grow straight out of a swamp. It doesn't mind sitting in 6 inches of water all the time, and it's really quite beautiful. But like all these wetland species, it is very vulnerable to any kind of wetland disturbance, be it ditch dredging, draining, or herbicides. And this is a screen cap from iNaturalist showing the current native range or the current documented uh, occurrences of the copper iris. And you can see they're mostly located around Reelfoot Lake State Park and the Memphis area, Beam and Shelby Forest State Park. Now, the populations around Reelfoot are fairly well documented. They're a little bit more accessible there, but there's actually a lot in Meem and Shelby Forest State Park. And this park, if you've never been there, it really is quite beautiful. It's north of Memphis, but you would never know you were that close to Memphis because it's very, very quiet and peaceful and feels very remote. It's quite a large park. It's 12,500 acres, and 11,000 of that is actually a state natural area, and 7,000 acres of that are protected bottomland. And In the context of what I just shared, obviously that makes it all the more precious that we have this ecosystem preserved. And in 2023, my coworker, Jeff Hill, he's now the Area 2 interpretive ranger, but he was a park ranger at Meeman Shelby at the time. He snapped a picture of a copper iris in a ditch, posted it on iNaturalist, and it created a lot of excitement and chatter among Division of Natural Areas and other plant enthusiasts and experts. And so as a result, he set out to go and see how many plants were out in the park. He conducted a survey. And to make a long story short, he recorded nearly 1,000 plants within the boundaries of the park, which is very exciting that we have that much of a population that is also protected. Most of these are a little off the beaten path. They're not easy to reach. I think there's a handful that you can see in the ditches on some of the park roads. And there was actually an article published in the spring 2024 edition of the Tennessee Conservationist where he details this adventure in the swamp finding these plants. So really amazing discovery to find all of those species in the backwaters. But it's not the only one. There are multiple rare species that are found. Again, this little precious sanctum for all of these plants. There's at least 3 others, the American featherfoil, bay star vine, and cedar elm that can be found on that property, and at least 11 state champion trees. Mac Pritchard himself commented that the trees in that region seem to grow exceptionally fast, and so if you want to see some big trees, that's a really great place to go. So all in all, a really special state park. So now we're going to shift gears and start talking about a species that's even more rare, which is the world sunflower, or Helianthus verticillatus. This is a federally endangered species. It was actually first described in 1892, but wasn't recorded for another century after that. So apparently even at that time, as long ago as that was, it was already becoming quite rare. This is a wet prairie species, and unlike the copper iris, this one likes wet feet, but also sunny skies. So it needs an open, wet habitat. And there's very little wet prairie left in Tennessee, and West Tennessee in particular. But it is native only to the Mississippi alluvial floodplain and in 3 states, exclusive to the southeastern U.S. So to sum up, it's very rare plant. It also doesn't compete well with woody vegetation and responds well to fire. So that's just further proof that this is a species that needs to live on a prairie. And since this is Pollinator Week, I am going to sprinkle some pollinator tidbits throughout tonight's discussion. And this is a species that is reliant on native bees for pollination, like many of our native plants, because the native bees are most efficient when it comes to transporting the pollen of sunflower species. And we actually have multiple specialists. There are bees that gather pollen only from native sunflowers. So they definitely need those native bees because they're not self-fertile. And we also noticed that there is a very high genetic diversity relative to its current population size, which strongly suggests that it was much more widely distributed at one time. And here pretty much is its range in Tennessee, or at least its naturally occurring range, mostly around the Jackson area, Tennessee. And the picture on the left is usually where you find it. It's going to be in a ditch along the roadside, or maybe beside an agricultural field. So a really very precarious situation. So that brings us to Pinson Mound State Archaeological Park, and this is one of 2 state archaeological parks that we have in Tennessee state parks. We have a third one, Cardwell Mountain, which is going to be becoming a state park here in the next couple of years. And it's really a special, really an incredible location, actually. It's the largest mound complex in Tennessee. It dates to from the middle woodland period, so about 2,000 years ago, up to 2,000 years ago. And it features a 70-foot tall mound, which is really just kind of mind-boggling to think about people making this before modern machinery, but they built this mound. And this complex, we're pretty sure had ceremonial significance, probably religious significance, and it seemed to be a site of pilgrimage for all these surrounding civilizations. And other than that, we really don't know. It's very much shrouded in mystery, but the mound didn't used to look like that. Actually, up until the year 2017, it looked like this. And it was kind of nice for visitors because it made it shady. Obviously, West Tennessee gets a little hot. But this is not how the mound would have looked when the indigenous people were there. So a lot of these trees, actually, they got pretty big. I think some of the oldest were around 100 years old, if not older. But when those trees start falling, they start ripping out the soil and disturbing the archaeological site. And so they made the executive decision to remove those trees. And so now it looks like this today. So closer to how it would have resembled back when indigenous people were there. And this is the view from the top. When you have a 70-foot structure and mostly flat land, it's really amazing how far you can see. And undoubtedly, when the Middle Woodland indigenous people were there, they would have been able to see a lot farther because the landscape would have been way more open. So you could have seen a lot from that site and also seen that 70-foot mound from a long way away as well. Okay, so why on earth am I rambling about Pinson Mounds? I was talking about a sunflower. Well, the Division of Natural Areas actually partnered with the Memphis Botanic Gardens to gather seeds from those very few wild populations of the world sunflower and introduce them to Pinson Mound State Park. They have several native grasslands that they manage there. And they have thrived. You can see on the left there, that's Alan Trentley, West Tennessee regional ecologist, modeling this really tall specimen. I think it was over 12 feet tall. And a single plant can have as many as 100 blooms on it. So it's a very, really impressive plant. And you can see they're doing very well. The initial plots were added in 2019, and they have 2 new plots coming with around 30 plants for this fall. So they're going to keep expanding that project. And it's doing very well. One interesting side note, though, most of the time, we try to manage these sites with fire, but with a site like Pinson Mounds, they can't use fire right now. They're actually having to wait for a study to come out to make sure that the type of burns that you do for controlled burn don't damage underground artifacts that still remain. So they're waiting for that study to come out. We know indigenous people did utilize fire in the landscape. Currently, they're just using mechanical removal, like just mowing, basically, to maintain it open. So why is that important? Well, we really don't know exactly what it was like when indigenous people were there. There's a lot of mystery surrounding that time period. But we do have plants that bear witness. We talked about how the sunflower can only exist where it's open, and a lot of these other prairie species that are on the landscape, we can examine, pollen and seed banks to get a paint at least somewhat of a picture of what it was like. We know it was more open, and we strive to maintain a site or restore a site as something that these ancient people would have recognized. And it's really kind of a cool thought to think about. They probably interacted with the ancestors of these world sunflowers that we're painting or that we're planting right now, whether they utilized them somehow or just enjoyed them like we enjoy them today. So really to honor and restore that botanical heritage helps honor that cultural heritage that is also tied to the landscape. So exciting stuff happening there. So now we're going to go to Henry Horton State Park, and this is probably not a park that you think about when it doesn't come to mind when you're thinking about rare plants or unique ecosystems. This is a park that's south of Nashville in Chapel Hill. It's quite a large park, over 1,500 acres, and this is one of our resort parks, as we call it. So you've got a restaurant, you've got a golf course, you've got a lodge, cabins, all that. But there's a lot more to it than that. Most notably, you have the Duck River that runs through the park. It's one of 2 state parks in the system that the Duck River runs through. And if you're not familiar with it, in and of itself, it's an incredible treasure in Tennessee. It is the most biodiverse river in the nation, one of the most biodiverse in the world, actually, and most notably for its diversity of fishes and freshwater mussels. And really, the park is kind of leaning more heavily into interpreting that as their primary theme because the Duck River is incredibly special. But we're not talking about the Duck River tonight. We're going to switch over to plants. And one notable feature, since this park is located in the Central Basin, you have what we call karst topography. So in the lower right-hand corner, that's a picture of Hickory Ridge Trail, some of the incredible honeycomb, the karst that you can see there. And they also manage multiple grasslands. They have several grassland projects on the park that you can see. And they're working to kind of restore these. Some of them have become somewhat cultures over the years, so they're going to be working on getting some more diversity back into those. And that's significant because as you look in this right-hand photo, you can see there's some stakes with flagging, and that's actually where the new lodge is going to go. They're going to be building a new lodge, and the view shed is going to be that central prairie. So it's going to be a really great sort of living testament to, ecosystem that would have existed there before. And in the bottom, you see a picture of that is the TDOT Partners for Pollinators plot. And that is a grant. I don't know what shape it's in right now. I haven't heard anything out of that in a while. But that is a grant that several state parks have utilized to also implement some pollinator habitat, and that's what that sign is right there. It's a lot of work going into that. But recently, I was invited to come out and check out some glades. A lot of people don't realize there are limestone glades at Henry Horton State Park, but there are. And I got to join Eli Harris and Park Ranger Gary Purchase to go out and do a preliminary survey or casual survey of the largest glades that are there. And we found some pretty cool stuff. We found a very large population of limestone fame flower. You can see on the right-hand side just how enormous some of those plants were. And I don't know how many of them you've encountered yourself, but usually the little basil rosette is like a quarter in size, but some of these were pretty massive. Unfortunately, the day we were there, it had rained, and so we didn't get to catch them all in bloom because they were all in bud. It would have just been spectacular. So there's a lot of those there, and we found a nice selection of a lot of other species you tend to associate with the limestone glades that are much further north. Things like Tennessee milk vetch, Gattinger's prairie clover, Gattinger's lobelia, of course prickly pear, glade petunia, and so on, and also Nashville breadroot. And when I was there, it was too late to see it in bloom. But David Lincecum with the Natural Heritage Program, they went out again and did another survey this spring, and they found a lot of Nashville breadroot. And what's interesting is they found multiple populations that are actually pale in color. So that's really interesting. And and then also this little plant here, I was really amazed by it. So it's called Obi-Wan Kenobia. That is its actual name. I don't know how it got that name, but anyway. But a lot of really interesting things that are in this glade. And this is just without any sort of management, but they're going to be bringing fire onto the landscape and also removing some of the woody vegetation so this site can really start to thrive. So now we're going to go over to Old Stone Fort State Archaeological Park, and this is actually our other state archaeological park, and this is located in Manchester, Tennessee. Another incredibly fascinating ancient site dating back to the Middle Woodland period, again about 2,000 years ago. And this old map on the left-hand side sort of illustrates how it's laid out, and it's really a remarkable site. So you have this central sort of plateau that's hemmed in on the north by the Duck River and the Little Duck River on the other side. And there's this structure, this wall that the ancient indigenous people built around it to hem it in. And then you have this entryway. And actually, the summer solstice is coming up this week. And if you visit on the morning of the summer solstice, you will actually see that the sunrise lines up at this entrance. And so we're pretty sure that's not an accident. And we know that, again, this was a ceremonial site that probably had religious significance, but we know that they did not live there. This is another site that they visited. However, that central area, they're working to restore it to more of a grassland that it would have been. So they've worked to remove some of the trees and woody vegetation that are in there, and they introduced a burn in the fall of 2023. And just since that, it's really kind of blossomed, for lack of a better word. And they have an ongoing iNaturalist project to document all the plant species that are showing up in there. And so far, at least 56 native plants have been documented in that field. And if you go out there in late summer, early fall, it's really beautiful. There's a lot of fragrant goldenrod. You can see all the haze of purple from the purple top. You look in a little bit closer and you see several species of goldenrod and asters and then the agellinus. And I don't know if you can see on your computers, but if you look closely, you can see in this picture, there's several dark streaks, and those are all caterpillars. This agellinus was just covered in common buckeye caterpillars. So a lot of diversity, multiple species of native grasses. And again, this is with minimal input. And I think that the fact that it is such an isolated site has really helped to preserve what is there. So there's very few invasive species. They are there, but by and large, it's mostly a nice homogeneous mix of native forbs and grasses. And here's just a few examples of species like butterfly pea, whorled milkweed, prairie aster, spiranthes, lady's trusses orchid, common ground cherry. All of these were here. None of this was planted. So one burn and it's taking off beautifully. Probably the most exciting discovery, though, actually wasn't a plant when I was visiting last fall. And that was this bumblebee. This is the American bumblebee, which is a species that is in very steep decline across its range, and it's completely dependent on open grassland, prairie habitat. And obviously, it's very much enjoying the native plants at this prairie. So it's wonderful to see that species thriving there. All right, so going back up into the Wilson County area, we're going to talk about the running glade clover, an extremely rare species found only in 4 counties, including one introduced population, and is critically imperiled. For those of you not familiar with the species, at first glance, it really just looks like your common European white clover. But if you look a little bit more closely, you can see that the flower head is different. It's kind of flattened, and it has these little florets that sort of uh, stick upwards. And then you have the leaves, which they lack that sort of white thumbprint that you see on the European species. This is found not in like the sunny part of the glades usually, but around the edges of the glades and also in the open woods. So it seems to be pretty shade tolerant. And like all the glade species, of course, it is very much threatened, mostly by development. As we know, Wilson and Rutherford counties, Wilson especially, are just experiencing unprecedented growth. So we're trying to preserve what we can while all of that land is getting snapped up. And so there's 18 sites where this species has been introduced in the Cedars of Lebanon State Park area. That's a picture of Margie Hunter. Got to join her out there one day when she was doing a count. And so she goes out there and she monitors these plants. And you can see how the glade clover has escaped or has grown out of its cage here. They're spreading, albeit slowly. They're not an aggressive species. But the cages are there to protect them from rabbits. I believe that's the worst offender. And more exciting news is there's going to be a pollinator study coming up next year. Sam Wilhelm is a PhD student with the University of Tennessee, and I've run into him on several occasions in the glades out there with his net catching bees and other pollinators. And he's discovered many first state records of bee species and a lot of really fascinating plant-pollinator relationships with these endemic plants. And so he's going to go out and basically find out who's pollinating the running glade clover. So really exciting. And even more exciting, Henry Horton State Park is now being investigated as another possible introduction site for this plant. So looking pretty good for this plant right now. And I can't mention Cedars of Lebanon State Park. We were just talking a little bit about the Couchville Cedar Glade, how it's doing really well right now. And in the Cedar Glade area, you have leafy prairie clover and, of course, Tennessee coneflower, which is in full bloom right now. It's doing beautifully this year. And then the spring, you have the sunny bells. This was actually taken during the Cedar Glade Festival this year, and it rained the entire time. It was so wet, but it was still very beautiful. And the top center, that's the Pines ground plum in bloom, another extremely rare and imperiled species. And I happened to run into the Division of Natural Areas when I stopped by Couchville Cedar Glade last week. And they told me that they actually just discovered a new unknown population of this species on private land like a week or two ago. So that's really good news. And they finished a pollinator study a year or two ago, I believe, on this one. All right, so that brings us to Edgar Evans State Park. This is a park that's my old stomping grounds. I still live very close to this park, very familiar with this area. And the river bluffs around the Caney Fork River are very unique. It's a very unique ecosystem. And it's also an ancient corridor, and we tend to not think of plants as being migratory, but river channels or river banks are like migratory pathways, corridors for these plants. And it's really that's the only way we can explain them, where we have species that we consider disjunct or ozark disjunct species that they're typically you would find them in the Ozark region, but why are they here? But they utilize those river channels and those banks to make their way down here. Now, in the right-hand picture, you can see this is what the bluffs looked like. This is probably in the early 2000s, mid 2000s. And during this time frame, they were actually working on Center Hill Dam, and the water levels were very low. And so about 30 feet lower than normal summer pool. And so the water would have been close to about 2/3 of the way up normally. And that presents a problem that we'll talk about here in a moment. But there's multiple rare and endangered species in these areas, both above and below the dam, such as western wallflower, Harper's umbrella plant, Wofford's wood mint, Svenson's rye, undescribed glandularia species, which we'll talk about also in a moment. And we do take tours out the week before Memorial Day to go and see these special plants. You can take a pontoon boat ride and go see them. And the good news is you're actually closer to them now that the lake levels are up. Um, and so Western wallflower is one of the species that we see out there. And true to its name, it is a primarily Western species. We have a few scattered populations in the east. And it really thrives out there. True to its name, it grows straight out of these rock walls pretty much. And they're very steep. If you want to see this plant up close, there are some places below the dam you can see it, but the really big bloomings are on these bluffs above the dam. And really, you have to take a boat and then rock climb or rappel to get an up close look at them. But they're really stunning flowers. Harper's umbrella plant is an endangered species only found in 2 counties, I believe, if I remember correctly. And this is a plant that it persists most of its life as a basal rosette, just a patch of leaves growing out of the rocks. And then at some point in its life, it sends up this really tall bloom spike. It's impressive in size, even though the flowers are kind of tiny. And after it blooms and sets seed, the plant dies. And there's quite a few of them out there on the bluffs, but that's really the only places you're going to find them are the bluffs around the Caney Fork and parts of the Cumberland River. And I happened to be out there a couple of years ago with Cooper Breeden, who at the time worked for the Tennessee Plant Conservation Alliance, and he was taking some seeds from these rare plants found in this area. And I took a couple home because there weren't any kind of records for when these seeds germinate. There's nothing in the literature. And so I decided I'd see, well, when do they germinate? And they actually germinate in the summer. And down the bottom, there's that plant right there today, growing happily in its pot. And I'm going to be transplanting that probably over at the park here this fall. So very hardy plant. Wofford's wood mint, this is a species of Blephilia woffordii that was described in 2020, so fairly recently, described as a new species. And again, I'm pretty much relegated to those sites around the river bluffs. And you find a slew of other species too. These are almost like vertical limestone glades. You have prickly pear and yucca, Svenson's ryegrass, which is over on the right, Canada milkvetch, really a ton of species, and that's barely scratching the surface. Probably the most exciting, at least lately, is going to be the verbena. And we know rose verbena, it grows in the glades and other areas of the state, but it was noticed fairly early on that it looks different. The one that grows around the bluffs around Center Hill just looks a little bit different. It has a more upright growth habit, kind of a sprawling growth habit. The color is also different. The color is more of a bright fuchsia than it's more of the purpley color you see with the other rose verbena species. And most importantly, it is also genetically distinct. So it is indeed a new species that is in the process still of being described. And I got to go out last week, actually, or a week before last, and pick a few leaves to send off to the lab to hopefully contribute to that project so we can finish the renaming process. And I believe it's going to be Glandularia cumberlandiensis or Cumberland verbena. But this is one that does really well in the bluffs. It had a beautiful bloom year, actually, this year. So I mentioned earlier about the issues that we're having with the ecosystem because it's a really narrow strip that these plants can survive. And it doesn't help that we had a really big flood in 2019 where the bluffs were completely submerged for at least a week. And that killed back a lot of these plants. And then since they fixed the dam or finished working on the dam and raised lake levels up, then you have all this woody encroachment from the top. And so basically the habitat that these species have to grow that need that sunlight has really shrunk down. And so we partnered with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers to go out there, had to get their permission first. This is a Corps of Engineers lake. We got their blessing and are removing some of this woody vegetation, namely cedars. This reservoir has been there since 1948, and I think some of these cedars have even just grown since the 1970s. And some of them are a little bit older. They have found some that dated back to late 1800s. But the other plants that are there, the endemics, they've been there a lot longer. So those trees are not going to waste. However, as the Corps of Engineers and the boat there, they're actually sinking those for fish habitat. And so you can see that it's really opened it up quite a bit. And here in this picture here, so the ranger in the middle, that's Angelo Giasante. He is a park manager over at Ocoee State Park, and He's very skilled with a chainsaw and also rappelling. We needed someone that fit both of those criteria to work in these really dangerous vertical sites. And he's been very generous with this time. And you can see behind him all of that verbena that's just exploded since last year. So bringing some of that sunlight back into this hillside has been really beneficial. And hopefully the wallflower will follow suit. It's not had good bloom years the last several years. I think the flooding contributed to it, the lack of habitat. So hopefully now that we've opened it up and we'll continue to manage it open, that'll make a good comeback. All right, so staying on the Caney Fork River, we're going to move upstream to Rock Island State Park. And this protects an even more rare ecosystem called the limestone river scour glade. And Dwayne Estes with the Southeastern Grasslands Institute wrote a really great blog article featuring this ecosystem on their website. I pulled a lot of this information and photographs from that. And the strip of habitat in Rock Island is considered the best example in the nation of this extremely rare ecosystem. We know more than likely that it was once widespread all along the banks of the Caney Fork River, but unfortunately, the building of dams, dynamiting the riverbed, these are all things that have removed a lot of that ecosystem. Interestingly, as the crow flies, this isn't all that far from Edgar Evans State Park, but you see a completely different slew of species there. So it's just really fascinating. Another big threat to this ecosystem are invasive species. So Warren County is the nursery capital of the world, and so there's no shortage of invasive species to work their way into these sites. So there's a lot stacked against it. Deutzia, I think that's how you pronounce that, is one that's really prevalent there. And so this is an image of Google Earth looking down at the site, and you can see just how small that river scour area is. So over here on the right, that is Great Falls Dam. And so any of this habitat that was upstream of that is gone. Below you have the Great Falls Gorge, and then eventually, not too far downstream, you're going to get to the beach area there at Rock Island, and that's where Center Hill Lake starts to back up. And so this is pretty much it for this ecosystem. And all of those rare plants are pretty much encompassed in this little section. So there's at least 8 that are rare, endangered, or undescribed. And some of those include Cumberland leatherflower. And I don't remember if this one has been officially described yet. Maybe Eli can drop a note in the chat. I think I saw him on here today. But Cumberland leatherflower, rock grape, maiden bush. I didn't even know what that was. I had to look it up. That's what this species is in the middle. Big bluestem, which the individuals that grow in this river scour area are thought to be a new species because they're dwarfed. Pringle's aster, white prairie clover, shining blue star. And you can see it's a pretty unremarkable looking landscape. It's just this big sort of scoured limestone area, very little soil with these plants growing up through the cracks. And I think just the fact that you have the generation schedule with Great Falls Dam kind of mimics that flooding that the scouring the plants need to maintain that site open. And so now we're going to move on to Burgess Falls State Park, actually more specifically Window Cliff State Natural Area. And this is the natural area that was added, our 85th one actually added in the year 2016. It's 275 acres and it features this incredible geologic landmark known as the Window Cliffs. And it's really quite rare for this part of Tennessee to have a structure like this that has persisted, made from limestone, because it's very fragile. And it's really quite remarkable. You kind of have to be up top to really appreciate it, but it's 200 feet tall and it towers above this deeply incised meander of Cane Creek, which is what ultimately created this feature. And you're kind of looking straight down on either side down at the creek, and you get a little, my knees get a little weak when I'm up there, but it's a really incredible site. And it actually was recorded by Charles Lesueur, who was a French naturalist that moved through, and he sketched many areas through the Tennessee area, including Window Cliffs. And this is his sketch here. It took me a while to track that down, but this was from a Tennessee Conservationist article by Bobby Fulcher, who featured Charles Lesueur and his works in Tennessee. And I wanted to put a comparison photo up. So on the right, that's one taken a few years ago, Window Cliffs, and it's cool to note the differences. So the drawing by Lesueur is a little more set to the left, but you can see there on the left, that's the small window, and then the big window on the right. You can compare them and you can see just how much since 1892 the structure has already begun to erode away. And also, what's very notable is in his sketch how open it is, because you have these people sitting here looking up at this structure, and you have a bank that's just kind of has some sparse trees on it, and they have a really great view of it. And then today you have a lot of tree growth. And so that is one clue, one precious little clue we have that tells us what the landscape would have been like at that time. And so the park staff, the rangers are working really hard to manage these grassland areas that are above the Window Cliffs at the national area. And they're still in the very early stages of management. They conducted their first burn last fall. They're working on removing woody vegetation, also hitting those invasive species. But we do have blackjack oak present on the landscape, which can be an indicator of an open ecosystem. And they're working really hard to open that up. And two species that we already knew were on the landscape there at Window Cliffs are northern white cedar and plains muley. And these are both species that are relics from the Ice Age, actually. And they can be found in and around the cliffs themselves. But that's not all. So, starting in June of last year, Eli Harris with the Tennessee Tech University has been conducting a floristic survey of Window Cliffs State Natural Area and conducting a comparative analysis of other published floras found on the Eastern Highland Rim. And so far, he has already documented at least over 15 rare and unique species just in this natural area. And you can see this is Pyburn Glade up here. And this is, you have these cliff tops with glade areas and seeps where you have some really unique species there. And you can actually find species that you would find much further away at glades. And there's just these little islands of populations of these species, which, would have had to have some connectivity to their surrounding landscape, long ago. But this is sort of their last stronghold because these shallow soils keep it open. So you're going to find things like pale spiked lobelia, whorled milkweed, butterfly milkweed, and pale beer tongue, and so on. And he's also made some very exciting discoveries in that region as well. Monkshood heartleaf plantain, which I believe there's only one other county record for this species in the state. Appalachian barren sunflower, Michigan lily, more of that Cumberland leatherflower, big leaf grass of Parnassus, and the list goes on. So really, really exciting. And it's amazing what you will find when you take the time to look for it. And so very, very thankful that he's out there doing this so that we can document thankfully, what we are already protecting as a state agency. And it's just always exciting to see what you have. And so we're going to end tonight at Harrison Bay State Park. And I apologize to my East Tennessee peeps who might be watching this evening. I only have one example from East Tennessee. So I'm a Middle Tennessee gal, so I'm more familiar with a lot of those projects going on. Harrison Bay State Park has the distinction of being our oldest or our first state park officially that opened in 1937. And across the water from it is Booker T. Washington State Park, which was also opened right around the same time. And you have some really old structures preserved there that were built by the Civilian Conservation Corps. But there's something that we suspect is much older as well. And so if you go take a walk at their Star Walk Trail, you're going to find this sort of what a lot of people would describe as a weedy field. And a while back, several years ago, before I was in this position, I used to be on the Partners for Pollinators partnership. And we were actually talking with the staff at Harrison Bay State Park because they were interested in applying for the TDOT grant to maybe spruce up this field or maybe kill it and replace it with something else. And we were on the call with Native Habitat Project, and they were actually on contract with TDOT to survey these sites. And we actually pulled up the iNaturalist sightings. And one amazing modern technology that you wouldn't necessarily think about is actually a Street View for Google. And you can get on there and you can actually identify a lot of species just by looking at the street view along roadsides, which is really amazing. And so we did that and noticed a lot of prairie species that are in this little field, such as rattlesnake master, eastern gamagrass, several species of bluestem, wild quinine. These are all species that are associated, with a prairie or a savanna. And so it was strongly suggested at that point that this is a very precious and rare savanna remnant in southeastern Tennessee. And there's been several new sightings that have been added by one of our seasonal interpretive rangers, Joseph, who's working out there this summer. And so it's very exciting. It highlights how important it is to have people to have more eyes in the field, because you don't always we really can't be everywhere at once. As much as we would want someone like Eli or the rangers or other biologists to hit all of these places, there's only so many of us to do that. And so it's very beneficial to have all these eyes in the field to document. And one good illustration of this is this sighting. I was going back and looking through all the iNaturalist records for this site and found this plant. This is a standing cypress, and this was documented in 2020. And I noticed a comment on there from Dwayne Estes, and he was really excited about it and inquiring about the finding because this was a species otherwise only known from one late 1800s sighting in McMinn County. And so that was very exciting, especially if this area was never planted, which the rangers there, they have no record of it ever being seeded or planted. It is more than likely, it has been open since the park was established in 1937 and likely was open well before that as well. Unfortunately, this plant has not been recorded since. Um, the hope would be that as the park staff begin to introduce fire, they begin to treat the woody or remove the woody vegetation invasive species, maybe, hopefully, this plant will pop back up again in that field. All right. So again, I know I'm preaching to the choir tonight for the most part, but there's a lot that everyone on this call can do this evening to help us prevent these plants from extinction. And one thing that we're always looking for are volunteers. We love our volunteers so much in Tennessee State Parks, just the man hours that they provide, because it is literally impossible for us to remove all the invasive species and manage all of this on our own. These lands are your lands, they're my lands, they're our public lands, and we really appreciate it when everyone pitches in to help, because it takes a community, not just of dedicated experts, but also a community of willing people that are just willing to get their hands dirty and jump in and help out. So you can find volunteer opportunities near in a park near you. There's actually a Galaxy Digital portal you can access from the Tennessee State Parks website. It's free to register, and you can actually favorite different parks and you get notified whenever volunteer opportunities show up. Or if you'd rather donate, that's also an option. We pull from the Iris Fund. We rely on the Iris Fund a lot for many of these projects. So that is a really important source for these conservation projects. And like I was saying before, just getting out in the parks with a phone, with a camera, observe and document, submit to iNaturalist. You don't have to know what you're looking at because you have dedicated experts on there who will come on and they will help you identify what you're looking at. And sometimes you never know that site, you could be the only one that documented that species, and it could be brand new to the area. It could tell us a lot about what's going on there. And so to circle back to our original question, so how do we preserve and protect while sharing? And again, there's not an easy answer to this. The answer would be to share responsibly as best we can, but that's really going to kind of depend on the situation. How that looks. Sometimes sharing is just talking about it in a virtual setting like this or taking people out. But the end goal needs to be the same. And that's we want to set the next generation on a path to stewardship, because we want people that love these plants, that love these spaces every bit as much as we do, so they continue to pass the torch down generation to generation. And a huge thank you to all of our partners. This is really just a small sampling of all the different agencies and organizations that partner with us to help us preserve these spaces. Again, we could not do it alone. And a big shout out to all the park rangers and park staff that are out there shedding blood, sweat, and tears to help work on these sites, to restore them and preserve and protect them as well. And a big thank you to you all for joining me tonight. This has been a great pleasure to share and to nerd out about plants. I love getting the chance to do a deep dive and learn about everything that's going on, all the different species. I always learn something new when I get to share out about these things. And there's my contact information if you want to reach out to me if you have any other questions. Otherwise, I'll be hanging on here for a while and I'll answer any questions you might have and I look forward to some discussion. So thank you all.
Thank you very much, Holly. This was fascinating. I could listen to you talk for 3 or 4 hours. And it's amazing how much activity there is in the state parks and all the things the staff, all the biologists and people are doing. And this and the photos and the explanations about the rare plants are just gorgeous and really, really interesting. Do
And
we
there's
have questions?
and there's a lot more too. I could have shared for hours because there's so much going on all across the state. It was kind of hard to pick and choose, but um,
That was a terrific picture of what's going on across the state, though, really. Yeah.
yes,
Uh,
weed wrangle. I saw someone mention weed wrangle in the chat. That comes up in March, so that's a good one to get involved with. But any time of the year, it's great to get out there and help the park staff.
those weed wrangles, how big an area would a make, like a Saturday morning weed wrangle accomplish? Like, how do you do that?
Well, it depends on the size group that shows up. I mean, I don't have any stats, but I know some of them generate, it's really amazing what a group of 20, 30 people can do. You saw the picture, I guess on that page with that was Philip who works at Roan Mountain. They had all those bags of honeysuckle. And so they really do make a difference because just the amount of man hours it would take, one ranger, and they don't have the time.
Mhm.
They want to. They want to be able to get out there and do that, but they just do not have the time. But you can cover a lot of ground with a good group of people.
That's encouraging. Yeah. Let's look at our questions here. If anybody has a question and wants to raise their hand, just unmute yourself and you can go ahead and do that. Um, let's see. Going way back to the beginning, Harland came up with the name of that relative of the skunk cabbage. It was the corpse flower.
Oh,
And
forest flower,
he's
not
got that
recluse.
all in there. Yeah. And then so Eli was saying that there is a, the plant you mentioned, I think it was where was it? In the
Hmm.
River Scour. It's a Clematis cumberlandensis.
Yes. So it has been described. I wasn't sure.
Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you.
And
Good
then,
evening, Ollie.
Yeah.
Dave Clark. How are you doing?
Hi. How are you? Good.
Doing all right. Recently, I ran across a small population of wood lilies, and I've been talking to Eli Harris and getting some good information on who to share that find with. It's not a new discovery of location, but I know the wood lilies are pretty uncommon.
Is it on private property?
Uh, it's on a power line cut, so I'm not sure
Oh,
of the ownership of the property.
okay.
But I
I
got
mean,
some good information from Eli about next steps.
good. Okay. I mean,
Yeah.
he could tell you more than anybody, but Division of Natural Areas might be worth reaching out to. I know depending on who's managing the right of way, TVA, they do have some projects where they do restorative work in power line right of ways. There's actually one I didn't mention this for Rock Island, but they've actually partnered with TVA and they put a prairie in the right of way that crosses Rock Island State Park as well. So.
Yeah, my conversation with Eli, I said, I don't believe I'm the discoverer of that population because of some signs that I've seen. But talking with Eli, I was like, I'd like to maintain it on the radar so it
Mhm.
stays protected or doesn't get sprayed and mowed out of existence.
Yep, it would be worth bringing it up to whichever company manages that area. Usually, And that can be a battle sometimes because usually it's contractors or subcontractors that come through and do the spraying, and that can be a real challenge. Um, I would suggest too, if you haven't, document them on iNaturalist so that those records get out there. If you haven't done that already, that might also help kind of get it on the radar.
I have iNaturalist, but I don't use it often. So if I post a photo from iNaturalist, it has unless I turn it off or erase it, it has the location coordinates.
Hmm.
So that's
If you,
one of the reasons I hesitate to post a sensitive
right.
plant on iNaturalist. So does somebody scrub those before it goes out to the public, or do you got to do that yourself?
I think it depends on the species. Some of the really rare ones, I think it automatically obscures it, but you do have the option to obscure the location when you submit a sensitive sighting.
I don't know if Eli's still there, but I think he said it was S1 for the
Okay.
wood lily.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's S1 and the wood lily is endangered in Tennessee.
And we found quite a number of them in a very limited area.
Maybe we think the other day about 30 plants were in bloom.
At least. Yeah.
Wow. Cool. Well, hopefully we can get them protected somehow.
Yeah, me too. Thank you.
All right. Well, if we have we
I was
have no
gonna, sorry, I was gonna jump in for a
There's Ann.
second.
Go ahead, Ann.
Hey, yeah, it's Ann Valentine. Thank you for recognizing the Memphis Botanic Garden. I work there and I propagated the sunflowers. Yeah, it's fantastic. So thanks for the recognition there. That's awesome. But this really surprised me when you popped the Iris fulva map up. Uh, there was a dot there that is almost exactly where I live, and I have those that are, yes, they're growing. The previous owner of my home said, so she did a lot of deturfing of the backyard, and she asked me if I would please buy her home because she knew I would continue the deturfing. um, but yeah, we've got a patch of Iris fulva, and they're mixed in with Versicolor. It's really pretty when they overlap a little bit. But yeah, I think my house might be on the state map.
That's exciting. Yeah, that's the iNaturalist map. So someone's reported them at some point.
Okay, I bet it was okay. I bet it was Wilma. All right. Well, that's that's super cool. And
That's
thank
cool.
you. Yeah, thank you for all the updates on the stuff that's going on across the state. Great work.
My pleasure.
Well, okay. Well, thank you so much, Holly. This was a fantastic presentation. I know everybody enjoyed it, and we were fortunate to have someone with your expertise. And like you said, you were nerding out about plants, but that's what the members do here. So this is great. Well, okay, everyone. We are adjourned for tonight. Thank you for being here. And just another mention that we just so appreciate all our members, and it's really enjoyable to get together.
Thank you all.
Thanks so much.